Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here to debut Reindeer games. So, I liked the twists and the turns in this movie. It actually was just fun to watch, even though it was also just like, man, this is a really slow film. But uh, I rather enjoyed it. So, we have this movie remind me of either 3,000 Miles to Graceland or the Nicolas Cage movie Snake Eyes that also had Gary Sinise in it, and I'm hoping I'm saying that last name correctly. But he also played Gabriel in this film, so you can go ahead and kind of look through the IMDb of this movie and find out that, like, oh yeah, I know that guy. So he was in Forrest Gump or Mice and Men or whatever the heck else. So going into this movie, we have this to be focused on a character named Rudy, who is played by Ben Affleck, who is to go uh, to prison for 5 years for hot wiring a car, and his 5 years are almost up. So Rudy is going on to pine away about hopefully making his way home for Christmas and thinking about all the food that he's going to eat on his way there. So Rudy wants finally making it out of prison, and to have had to meet up with a girl named Ashley. Rudy then goes on to kind of change up who he really is to then have Ashley believe that this guy is someone else. So Rudy plays up with this for a while, thinking that it's like, well, it's only going to be a certain number of days or this and that. But Ashley is to go on and forcibly meet Rudy up with a number of guys who are all wanting to rob this casino, which supposedly Rudy has knowledge of, which he really doesn't. So Rudy is to go on to continue to just come up with stuff off the fly, so that way he can kind of fool these people into like buying himself more time so he can live longer, so he can hopefully escape, or hopefully just kind of figure out a way to manipulate the situation so much so that he might be able to just make it out of here unscathed and also get away with all the money. So we have this movie to just be a great film. I liked it. It was fun. Slow, but fun. And so that is overall my grading. And so you can go on and watch this movie on HBO Max. And I know it's a very easy and quick way of me going on and describing this film. And so, yeah, like, I think a lot of people would probably want to go on and compare this movie to the Ben Affleck film The Town. But, like, to me, I was like, ugh, like, that's really stretching because the story doesn't feel exactly like The Town, but it's somewhat similar in a way. But either way, like, when I see movies like The Town, I kind of think more of like Point Break or something to compare that to. But anyways, I think it's about that time to just go into that double five time territory, because I think it's about that time again to go into spoilers. It's HBO Max is where you can dare in fact see this movie. If you can afford HBO Max or whichever, there is a number of bootlegish apps that you can probably go onto a Google Play Store. If you go and just search the word movie apps, you can probably just kind of search through the lists of stuff and kind of find what app will best fit you. With being able to see like everything for free, there are certain apps that, of course, are like Yes Movies or 123 Movies or something along those lines. You'll go on to possibly find a number of different apps that I've recommended or suggested over time that maybe you can Google search them and maybe they'll still exist somewhere. But yeah, like, it's fairly difficult the longer I do this. to recommend an app, and it will still be on the Google Play Store or wherever the heck else that you get stuff at. So, with that said, it's about that time to just go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time I'm going to spoil this movie. So, in the very beginning of this film, we have this kind of odd visual of just like a number of these Santas that are just kind of placed in these kind of awkward places because they had all either been killed or they had all just been laying on the ground for whatever reason. So, and we'll get to the explanation of that later on in the film, because, like, we just have this odd visual in the beginning of this. We also have Ben Affleck that is to kind of narrate in a very unusual way in this movie. Like he's in a hallway or something and doing these lines. But again, if I'm to go on and give crap for quality, then who am I to say anything? So, but the real story of where it starts is we have Rudy that is in this prison for 5 years. And so his 5 years are up. So Rudy is talking to his cellmate named Nick, who seems to have gone on and had this whole pen pal thing where he's talking to a girl named Ashley, and Nick is to have all these pictures of Ashley all around the cell and so on and so forth. So we have Nick consistently reading Rudy these letters. So both of them are kind of getting out of prison soon. So we have Rudy and we have Nick who are kind of walking through prison one day, and they end up seeing this guy called the Alamo. And we have Rudy who's like, oh my god, like I know that guy. Like I think like he was to be involved in my case. And so yeah, like he might want to go on and kill me later on. So we have Rudy and we have Nick, and they're going to lunch. We all of a sudden notice within this lunch that we have a guy named Zook, who is played by Isaac Hayes. A lot of people probably know him as Chef from South Park, or he had a really good music career. Passed away from pneumonia. I think the story was that he was on a treadmill and like he had pneumonia and maybe he was trying to sweat it out and he ended up passing away, I guess. Might have been the story. So people can correct me, that's okay. So Rudy and Nick are all of a sudden sitting next to Zook, who is to pull out this bug from his meal, and we all of a sudden have everybody starting to pull out the same bug in their meal, and they are, of course, to get very upset. Riot breaks out. All of a sudden, we find that Rudy is going to get shivved pretty soon by the guy that Rudy talked about earlier. So Nick is to, of course, go on and take this shiv and protect his friend, and he ends up supposedly dying for it. So Nick dies, and Rudy is like, man, like this guy took his life from me. So Rudy is to go on and get released from prison. And so Rudy is just kind of looking around at all the people that have made their way to this prison to pick up their past prisoners. So Rudy is to all of a sudden see Ashley, but Rudy's like, no, I can't go on and I can't talk to her. I'm just going to go on this bus and leave. So Rudy gets on this bus and he's kind of telling himself, like, no, don't go out there. And so Rudy is kind of wiping the window and is seeing Ashley out there just kind of pining away for her Nick, who is dead. So Rudy gets off of the bus and is to say to Ashley, it's like, well, hey, like, I'm Nick. Like, look at me. I'm this guy who I'm not actually going to be. So we have Rudy that goes on to go to this diner with Ashley, and so like Rudy's going on eating this meal that he's just kind of been pining away for. And so Rudy and Ashley are just kind of both kind of talking, and Rudy states how like he was just kind of concerned about how he looked to Ashley, and Ashley was kind of concerned how she looked to him, and like that's why they didn't exactly uh like kind of easily meet one another. And so Ashley is telling Rudy, it's like, well, I thought that your hair was like long and curly, and Rudy is like, well, I cut my hair. It's like they made me. So we had Rudy and we have Ashley, and they go right into lovemaking. And then after that, we have Ashley that goes on to buy Rudy's clothes. Rudy is to go on and flush his driver's license down the toilet so Ashley won't know that this is actually Rudy. But Rudy goes on to state that he's like, well, hey, I'm only going to do this through the holidays as he's getting this $200 coat because Ashley's just blowing money on Rudy. So Rudy puts up with him being Nick for a couple days longer. And so when Rudy comes back to this kind of hotel, they meet with a bunch of other men who are pointing guns at Rudy and forcing him to go along with robbing this casino. So we have Gabriel that goes on and needs to confirm that this guy is who he says he is. And we, of course, then have Rudy confess. It's like, no, 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 no. Like, I am not the guy that she thinks that I am. Like, I'm a guy named Rudy. Like, I'm not this Nick guy. Nick had gone on to die in prison, and I'm not this guy. So we have Rudy going on and trying to convince this to Gabriel, and he's not buying it because it's like, oh, you're only telling me this so that way you can get out of here, but instead I'm just going to put a bullet to your head. And we even have Rudy that convinces this to Ashley. It's like, no, 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 no. Like, Nick had died in prison. And so we have Rudy that is trying to tell people the truth, but they aren't buying it. So we still have Rudy being played off as he's Nick, to the point of Gabriel going on and reading one of these letters, and like Gabriel's like, wow, Rudy, or wow, Nick, like you really have a way with words, as he's kind of reading this whole thing about him being in the cell, but eventually pining away for Ashley, and this and that. So we have Rudy that is to probably assume that he had gotten played here by Ashley, and Ashley's like, no, like I'm in this just as much as you are, and like I'm so afraid of my brother, and like kind of just do whatever he tells you. And so we finally have Rudy realize that he is going to go on, and since he has information that these guys don't, he's going to use it against them. And so when they go on and they need the layout of this casino and they need information about it, we of course have Rudy who's like, well, like I want my frickin' pie. Like, I want my pie, I want my hot cocoa. Like, of course, he was to mention when he was in prison that was like the first thing that he really wanted. So Rudy is to kind of look at this layout of this casino and he's like, wait a minute, like, this is all wrong. Like, all these places are all shifted around. And, like, what is this place? And it's like, oh, it's the buffet. And he's like, the buffet? What? So, Rudy is kind of making up all of this stuff that the whole casino had been remodeled. And, like, all of this stuff is all different. And so, we have Rudy that states that he needs to actually go in and really case the joint and just kind of look around to see like what has changed. So we have the guys that go on to buy all of this. So we have, of course, Nick needing to go into this casino, but they're going to kind of watch him like a hawk. And he's going to go in there with a disguise as this weird, goofy cowboy. So Nick goes in there as this cowboy, and we end up having the owner of this casino going on and talking to these kind of government officials or these governors. So we have Jack going on and talking to these guys and like figuring out a way to like, well, hey, like this is what we really need. That's what we really need. And so like I guess the casino is a big moneymaker for this town, but like we're really starting to have Jack contemplate if he really wants to go on and like go back to Vegas. And so Jack makes his way through this casino to then bump into Rudy's character as he's this cowboy. And so they all of a sudden start to talk. And so Jack is like, well, hey, like, what do you think this town really needs? Do you think it needs like a casino on the roadside? Or like, what are you thinking? And so we have Rudy that goes on and answers him. It's like, oh, okay, all right. So Rudy just walks away. So we have Merlin go on to kind of be upset with Rudy. It's like, well, hey, like, what did you tell that guy? And Rudy's like, I didn't tell him anything. Like, we just had just kind of chit chat, but like nothing really came of it. So Rudy is stating that his like mustache is starting to come undone, so he needs to go to the bathroom to fix it. So we all of a sudden find that Ashton Kutcher is in this film, and so what happens here is that Rudy goes on and exchanges his outfit with Ashton Kutcher's character, and so when we have Merlin that is to go on and talk to one of the waitresses and ask, it's like, well, hey, like, when did you guys remodel this place? And we have the woman is like, wait a minute, like, we've never remodeled. And Merlin's like, aha! So Merlin goes running into the bathroom, and so we then have Rudy, who is to tell this kid to like, hey, start running. So they go on and they're all chasing after the cowboy who's Ashton Kutcher, and we of course have Rudy who's kind of like slipping out of the back without anybody noticing him. So we have Gabriel and all of his men who chase down Ashton Kutcher's character to realize he's like running to this car, and they're like, oh my god, this isn't the right guy. So they start running around the casino, finally figuring out where, of course, Rudy's character is. So now we have Rudy who is kind of with Ashley, and they're running off now. So because Rudy ends up kind of flagging down this car, and the car ends up being with Gabriel and Ashley in it, and so Rudy grabs Ashley and they run together, and they're now running to this ice fisher's like house, and so they're running basically on ice now. So we have Gabriel at one point just kind of firing into the ice, and what happens is that Ashley ends up falling through the ice, and so we then go on to have Rudy, who is to have to jump in there with her, of course, while wielding this gun. So Rudy goes after Ashley and is to fire into the ice so they can kind of get a hole and break through this, and they luckily do. But then the men are just standing right there, like, okay, all right, like we're gonna just grab them out of the ice. So we have Ashley that goes back to her room, and she, of course, is probably to be like get into a very hot bath or hot shower or whatever to kind of fight off hypothermia. They didn't show that in the movie, but I'm assuming that's what's happening in my brain. So we have Rudy that goes on to meet up with Gabriel, and there's a whole thing about these darts, which is kind of really interesting. So, but we also get some backstory from uh, from Gabriel's character, because we have them kind of being wheeled into this like kind of semi truck the whole time with this trailer, but like we really get to know Gabriel's story in this scene. So we have Gabriel that's going on and is to want to do this whole dart contest thing, and while Rudy is just kind of just shivering and just so Gabriel states if right here and now, if Rudy can go on and successfully hit the closest to this bullseye than what Gabriel can, then he'll let him free to go out and be with his sister Ashley and have kids and whatever they want. So we have Gabriel that goes on and just chucks this dart, and it just kind of hits like somewhere close to the dartboard, but doesn't actually like have any real like impact of any real sort. So now Rudy is up and he can't even throw the dart. So Rudy then falls under this chair, and so we then have Gabriel with this story about when he was kind of driving on these roads, how there would always be a bunch of these other cars, these families that always just hate the fact that he would be on this road. And so Rudy would be hearing this all while Gabriel is just tossing darts at him, and they would just kind of hit like the sides of his head consistently. And so Rudy, of course, would like beg for Gabriel. It's like, please don't hit me with these darts. And Gabriel's like, well, I've been trying to hit you. So we then have Gabriel, who goes on with the other sets of darts, really going on and really hitting Rudy just all over his body. So they then drag Rudy back to Ashley's room, and so we, of course, possibly have Rudy suffering from hypothermia, and so we have Ashley who's trying to take off all of Rudy's wet clothes and try to comfort him the best way she can. So we have Rudy that is again talking about some meal of his and talking about, I think he's talking about gravy and all these things. So we then go on to have Ashley that is no longer in the room. And so Rudy, who is now kind of handcuffed to this bed, is to try and figure out a way to uncuff himself and try to get out of this room. So we have Rudy that starts to walk around this place hoping that he can somehow escape, find some exit, and instead it seems that all of these guys are to all make their way to certain parts of this place that they're at, and so wherever Rudy is to go, he sees another one of these guys. So while Rudy is to finally make it to this pool area, he starts to hear both Gabriel and both Ashley talking. And this, of course, is to have us find out more about this story, where, come to find out, Ashley and Gabriel are to not be brother and sister. If anything, Gabriel is starting to get more and more upset that Ashley is to be with Rudy because it's kind of tearing him apart because he wants to be with his woman who is actually Ashley because they're lovers and they're not brother and sister. So Ashley and Gabriel are like, well, hey, like, this guy is thinking that, like, he's going to go on and get one over on you, but instead we're going to get one over on him because he doesn't know we're in cahoots and I'm telling you all what's going on. So Rudy is going on like, oh my god, I've been had. Like, this whole time, like, I'm thinking that me and Ashley are going to get out of here, but it's only going to be me. Like, I'm only gonna give a crap about me getting out of here alive, and I would have had a chance. But so we also have Rudy, who is gonna catch a other conversation going on between both Pug and one of the other guys. Might have been Merlin or Jumpy, who of course is Danny Trejo. So I think it's Merlin and Pug that I think are talking together. And we have them state that they're going to go and kind of sweep to see uh, if Rudy is up or whatever. So Rudy then has to rush back to his room, hoping that he can figure out a way to kind of hotwire this room door to have it be open. He's like, man, if I can hotwire a car, I should be able to get into this room easily. So luckily, Rudy can get into this room and to look like he is still handcuffed to this bed. So by the time that Merlin is or one of the guys is to come in to look on Rudy, Rudy is to just kind of be playing with these cards. And he's kind of looking out this window and he's like, crap, like, I can't get out of here. So we go further into this film, and so Rudy is to have to give these guys paperwork that is to kind of be the design or the layout of this casino and where like the security room is and where all these places are for them to go. So he gives them all this information, and so in turn they go on and tell him that he's going to go on and be disguised as a Santa Claus because they have all these Santa Claus get-ups. And so we have Rudy that goes on to convince them that they need 6 guys to pull this all off. And Gabriel's like, no, we only need 5 guys. And Rudy's like, no, you need all of us. Like, you need everybody. So Ashley convinces Rudy that this is a good plan, So they in turn tell him that's like, okay, like you're gonna go on and be wearing the Santa suit. So we and I know that might not be in the order of how this all plays out, but it's pretty dang close. So we have Rudy, who is to state that it's like, well, hey, like I want a gun. If I'm gonna have to rob this place, like I should get a gun, right? So they end up giving him a squirt gun that is to just kind of like spray out this water. So while Rudy is to get into his attire, he is to be talking to Pug, and Pug is to have this alcohol, and so Rudy pours this alcohol into the squirt gun. So we then go on into the heist. So the whole plan of it is that we have, of course, uh, two Santas come in first. So we have Rudy and we have I think Trejo goes in there, or I think Jumpy goes in there with Rudy. So we have the two of them go first, and they're talking about that they like had worked at this kind of department store, and they're kind of they need some time away, and so on and so forth. We had Gabriel that goes on to state that there should be like something very special about Christmas Eve, and how like securities probably be very lax because it's Christmas Eve, and so uh, Gabriel is to go on and find out how really lax it really is. So we have Rudy and Jumpy then it's going in there, and we have Rudy that is complaining to the guy next to him how it seems that like he's taking all Santa's money and getting really upset. It's like, well, hey man, like I'm just beating you. I'm sorry. So we have Jumpy that kind of switches, and then Gabriel comes in, and so Gabriel goes on and he leaves, and so we have Jumpy that gets all these coins. So we have Gabriel that goes to the security room and is to realize the map uh, that of course Rudy had given him was wrong. So we luckily have him stumble upon the security room anyways, and he bashes through it, and he like sets fire to the whole room, or he shoots up the whole room. So we have Jumpy that ends up tossing these coins in a bunch of people. So we then set up, it's like, okay, like time for the robbery, everybody's getting their guns out. So we have Pug that ends up going to this safe, and immediately when he goes on to open this, we have a bunch of guys that all have these shotguns, and they go on to like shoot up Pug, and so he's dead. So we have Merlin that is very upset with of course Rudy, because it's like, well, hey, like you like so much so like told us that there was going to be like very lax security, and you're completely wrong. And so we have Merlin just kind of lighting the cigarette, and he's going to soon kill off Rudy, but then Rudy is to have the squirt gun, and so he sprays the squirt gun into Merlin's face, and he lights Merlin on fire. And so we have the guys go into this room with all this money and starts grabbing all this money, and as they go on and kind of shoot all their way through this. So we have these security guys that show up to try to hold everybody up, and Ashley breaks through with this car through this door and is to hold a gun on Rudy. And we have a plethora of times where people are kind of noticing that Rudy is trying to grab for this gun, and they're like, no, 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 like, you're not going to get this. So we have, after Rudy is to kind of take out Merlin and is to try to kind of run out of this casino, we, with all this money, we have Rudy that is holding a gun on Gabriel, and Gabriel's holding a gun on him, and so Rudy is possibly thinking that he's going to go on and escape here, but so Ashley, that's when Rudy is to then reconfirm that it's like, oh, Ashley's on their side. Oh, yeah. So we have Gabriel that goes back to the kind of casino owner, and we have Gabriel that's still going on and on about that powwow safe because they want to take all the money. So we again have Rudy that's convincing them, it's like, well, hey, I'm not the guy that you think that I am, but at least I think I might know like something that this guy knew. So we have Rudy mention that there's possibly a safe that is behind this uh, the alcohol, or the like behind this kind of like place where there's a bunch of alcohol there. So they move this shelving unit to find that there's this big massive safe, and we of course force Gabriel to open up this safe by having like Jack do the combination. And once Jack has a combination, he has all these guns and he's blasting away at all these people. So we had like Ruby was like, yeah, like he's gonna hopefully take all these guys out and I'm just gonna get out of here. So we have Jack that is going on and trying to chase off all of these guys and try to shoot them. And so luckily what happens with all of this scrambling, with all this with these people running off, so by the end of this we have Gabriel, Rudy, and Ashley left because everyone else gets killed. And so we go on to have it set up that that Gabriel is going to want to go on and kill off Rudy here. So how they present this is that when Rudy is going to get killed by Gabriel, that's of course when Ashley decides to then turn on Gabriel and shoot him, and we all of a sudden are starting to hear this whistling in the background. Come to find out, Nick is still alive. So Nick ends up going on and stating that he didn't really die via that stab wound, but he ended up somehow paying off a guard for him to get out of prison. So and that the whole plan all along was to have Ashley turn on all these guys and then have Nick and Ashley run away with the money and have Rudy be the fall guy and have him go on to just be another one of these robbers. So Rudy ends up getting put into this car, forcibly tied to uh, this car, and so Rudy is to have this knife. He takes it out and is to kind of undo his ties, and then he is to hotwire this car. And so Rudy is to state, it's like, hey, like, here's a thing that you should learn: never go on and put a guy in front of a car who was to go to prison for stealing one. So Rudy then is to quickly hotwire this car as it's now on fire, and so Rudy then puts it in reverse and runs over Nick, and then also runs over Ashley, and so now we also have Rudy that goes on to put this semi and put in reverse, so that way it goes on and just kind of kills both Ashley and Nick off. So Rudy is to find the bags of cash, and so he ends up kind of lobbing it over his back, and is to just kind of walk home. So Rudy is to take quite a bit of this money and just kind of dump it in certain mailboxes, which might be his family members or might not be his family members, but either way, like, Rudy's gonna have a pretty good sum of money here. So by the end of the movie, we come to find that Rudy is to make his way home after all, and is to be knocking on the door of his family, who is now having this big meal during Christmas time. And so that's the way, of course, the movie ends up just kind of playing out for us. So with that said, I kind of maybe didn't quite get into much of the details of this movie, but I kind of overall just kind of went into the kind of quick meat and potatoes of it all. But anyways, with that said, yeah, that goes on and is to cover most of this movie. I know there were certain points where probably didn't cover all of it, like especially how Danny Trejo died. But either way, we go on and we have a really just interesting part of this film being played out, like the further and further we go on, as there's these twists and like Nick still being alive. And so yeah, so that was great. With that said, I'm gonna get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody. Let me know in the comments below if there's anything that I completely missed, or if there's any little details or whatever. But I think I went on and covered most of this movie. So that's it. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.